Welcome to another Power Monkey podcast where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn. And on today's episode, we have Ahmed Jabali-Nash. Ahmed is going to be one of our new instructors for our Camp Restore, which we're going to be unveiling for the first time this fall. Really excited to have him on the podcast. There's a lot of transferability from his world of yoga and breathing techniques, what we do on the fitness side. Talk a lot about inversions and handstands and some technical differences and similarities between maybe the gymnastics world and what they do in yoga. Love talking to him about handstands, love talking about some breathing work, and hope you guys enjoy this one as well. Well, welcome, Ahmed. How you doing, man? It's good to get you on the podcast. Where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from Virginia right now. I'm from Washington, D.C., but I live in Virginia at the moment.
Oh, nice. Very good. Well, we want to give our listeners a little bit of a background. This is obviously the first time we've had you on, but it's also one of the first times that we've had someone from outside of our kind of immediate network of CrossFit coaches and athletes. And it's great to be branching out and bringing you on board. You're going to be one of our headline instructors for our new Restore camp that we're bringing about this fall. And we're really excited about it. It's going to be a kind of a new area for us to bring in experts. And we just want to introduce you to our audience. So would you mind just giving as brief as you can, a little bit of a background in terms of your movement background and kind of where it brought you to where you are today?
Awesome stuff. Well, yes, thanks for having me on, first of all. And my name is Ahmed Jabali-Nash. I'm hailing out of the Virginia area, aka DMV. Been practicing yoga, facilitating yoga for the last 8 years. And love handstands, love arm balances, things of nature to challenge my practice and things of nature, but I'm also a love of breath facilitation, which I'll be bringing to the retreat. And we go into things of that nature. So practicing pranayama, which is our life force. And if you don't know how to breathe properly, you're slowly diminishing your life inside that moment. So this is what I love.
Amazing. So maybe we can just jump right into there. That breathing thing is something that has become such a hot topic with us, with our podcasts over the last couple of months. With regards to breathing, can you dive into that a little bit in terms of what your approach is when it comes to breathing, specifically with how you do your yoga practice?
Sure. For me, it's pretty much when people think about with breath, they hear pranayama a lot. You know, it's always talk about like with breath, breath, breath. That's all they hear about. When I say pranayama, it's in Sanskrit, it's broken down to life force, and that's your energy source, right? If you don't know how to breathe properly, like I said, you're diminishing your life force in that moment. And no matter what posture you're in, it could be simply laying down in shavasana or inside of an intense handstand transition or something of that nature. But if you don't know how to breathe properly, you can't execute that in a sensation that you should be doing, right? Whether you're doing explosive movements inside of a fit, what's it called, CrossFit, you're a football player, you're a weightlifter, you're a swimmer, no matter what you are, you have to be able to breathe properly. And if you can breathe properly, you can be as strong as you can possibly be. So it can help out with anxiety, it can help out with stress, it can help out with all the different back pains and things of that nature, how to sit properly. And if you know how to really listen to your body while you breathe, you can just sit here right now while we're sitting on this podcast and breathe properly and sit up straight, and your back might get, less pain rather than letting everything dump down into your lower back or into your hips and things of that nature. So I always pretty much just focus on breath so that comes back to the simple parts of the life.
So to you, what do you consider to be proper breathing? Is it a nasal breathing component? Can you just explain exactly what you mean when you say proper breathing?
It depends on what practice you're doing. When it comes to athletic movements, I usually breathe through my nose and out of my nose. When it comes to certain relaxing breathings, in through my nose, out through my mouth. So it depends on what practice you're doing. So it always changes. You have 4-count breath, 8-count breath, holding your breath. You can do all these different things to excite your body. You don't have to necessarily drink coffee to excite your body. You can do a breathing exercise, right? You don't have to necessarily drink, let's smell lavender and all those kind of things to cool your body down for sleep. You can do a breathing exercise. So it's multiple different levels of breathing techniques to take you to whatever aspect you want to go inside your life.
That's interesting. So you said doing physical activity, you would use more nasal breathing?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Even at higher intensities, or do you feel like mouth breathing is necessary when you're starting to get towards higher intensity type training?
I don't necessarily do mouth breathing at all, really, as far as like open in through the mouth, out through the mouth. I usually say control because I can control my breath a little bit easier when I do nasal breathing. Whether it's I can breathe in fast, I can breathe in slow. I like to breathe through my nasal capacities when it comes to my control wise. Um, and it allows me to really find balance inside that moment. As far as Ujjayi Pranayama breath, the victorious breath, breathing in through your nose, out through your nose. Um, it builds heat inside your body to actually warm your body up a little bit faster rather than, letting out the intention, letting out that heat out your mouth, things of that nature. So like when it comes to like fast paced movements, in through my nose, out through my nose.
Hmm. Chad, have you started applying any of that to your training at all yet? I've been doing so much more nasal breathing. I'm just curious whether or not you're doing any of your lifts these days.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, since we talked to a lot of people on this podcast, it's, not something I really paid too much attention to it just in regards to nasal breathing. Always very big on, you know, breathing in a certain way or doing certain things with breath as a weightlifter to brace as much as I possibly could. And I was always teaching that, but I wasn't really paying attention to whether athletes or myself were doing it through the nose or not. And so now it's something that I'm starting to play with and starting to apply a little bit more here and there and experiment with some of my athletes as well. But certainly, the big bulk of what I do now training wise for myself is literally just a quick, at most 30-minute workout 3 to 4 days a week. And so what that is me still lifting weight, but doing it more quickly. So I'm doing a lot of EMOMs and stuff like that. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to use that opportunity, one, while I'm warming up to uh, do nasal breathing as much as I can. When I start breathing hard, like you said, Dave, I don't have that control right now to not breathe out of my mouth, in and out of my mouth because I'm very deconditioned, Dave. So I breathe hard more quickly than most people do. but what I'm really doing and what I'm noticing a difference and a change in is when I'm done with those EMOMs, when I'm done with the workout and I've reached my point of the highest level of exhaustion because I sprint to the finish. Um, and I throw myself down on the ground dramatically like I always do, I'm at least paying attention to how I'm breathing. So I will allow myself to breathe in and out my mouth only for, say, 15 or 20 breaths. And then I'll make myself breathe in my nose and out my mouth. I'll do that for a certain number of times. And then I'll go back to my mouth and then I'll go all nasal breathing. And so what I'm doing over time is I'm trying to train that in develop the ability to do more of that sooner. And just by focusing on that, I noticed that I'm up off the ground a lot more quickly than I was before. So I think there's definitely something to it. And I'm excited to continue playing with it for myself and for my athletes as well.
Yeah, I always like that 2 minute recovery after doing VO2 max test with Jamie and Isaiah and our XFit Lab team. Just taking that 2 minutes post VO2 max to see how much closer you can get to your full recovery, and to use breathing within that
Mhm.
2 minutes, whatever breathing technique that is. Slow things down, get that heart rate back down to see whether or not within that 2 minutes post intense workout I can get back to as close to full recovery as possible, and using breathing to be able to do it.
Mhm.
Now, Ahmed, you were mentioning when there a lot of balance, talking about balance within your breath, but also balance as it refers to your love of hand balancing and
Oh,
inversion.
Lord, here we go.
Yeah. So this is the rest of the podcast. So we talked about something else, and now we're just going to talk about handstands.
Exactly.
45 minutes. How did that come about? How did you find a love and a passion for being upside down? You weren't a gymnast, right? You did not grow up being a gymnast.
No, I was not. It's funny because I played soccer, played golf, musician and things of that nature, building houses. But as a child, like just doing weird things, like walking around on my hands and things of that kind of nature, just having fun with my siblings. But once I actually got into like mixed martial arts and found like a strength in that manner, um, I started playing around with handstands in a different manner, like seeing the strength inside my wrists and forearms and shoulders and back and things of that nature. When I got into yoga, I was like, oh, you guys do handstands in here, and it's
Mhm.
awesome. But it came to a finding focus and like with Dristy and like your gaze point, breath control, through the nature wrist and forearm strength and fingertip strength to actually stay still, because like
Mhm.
that was the task and like the focus for me, because I could easily go on my handstands and walk 10, 12, 15, 20 steps and things of that nature and have fun with it. But it's like, how can you challenge yourself to stay still? Whether it's in a handstand, whether it's standing right side up, because at the end of the day, like we're always falling, right? When we're walking, right? We're walking and we learned
Mhm.
how to fall and catch ourselves, right? So like playing around with handstands, it was like that same thing. Inverted myself, like, oh, I can technically fall with my handstand and walk and catch myself, but how can I keep myself in a controlled manner with the core engagement? And it's a full body workout, right? From the hands all the way to my tippy toes. So like, how can I align everything together rather than playing around with like that banana back sensation just to get a handstand, just to like execute something, but you're also diminishing the actual focus of the practice and putting stress inside of other parts of your body when you're doing those banana back sensations.
All right, so Chad, I don't know how much you want to go into here, but I have a million questions now.
Oh, I
So,
mean, I have nothing to say. I mean, I'm just here to learn more about handstands because I think he's going to be able to teach me far more than you ever have about handstands. What it sounds like.
well, I try not to teach you anything so that I can keep
Exactly.
teaching you workouts. You know how that is.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple of things here. One, you mentioned learning how to walk prior to learning how to finding stability,
Mhm.
and we deal with this a lot within our CrossFit world, where a lot of people are working on handstands to become better for things like handstand push-ups using a wall, but then also handstand walking is a component of a lot of workouts. So what people end up doing is just kind of throw themselves into the handstand walking and just use momentum and really hope for the best. It becomes more of a controlled fall rather than actual handstand walking. But I'm curious kind of what steps you took to be able to say, okay, I have the strength to be able to stay inverted, but I don't understand the stability aspect. You talked about forearm strength, talked about fingertip strength, talked about your gaze down on the ground. What were some of the things that you did to be able to make that step from being able to stay comfortable inverted walking, but then make the jump to say, okay, how do I now find stability within this movement?
Um, so the walking part was not something that I like trained to do. That was just something like I just like naturally just like, let's just F around and like go upside
Right.
down and see what happens, right? But when it came to like the stability portion of it, like standing still, like actually stacking the plumb line when I stood straight up inside of Samastiti Tahi, right? Standing still, understanding like how my core engagement, my tailbone, where is that inside the practice? Like actually where's my shoulders inside the moment? Like how my slide my neck back and things of nature. And inside the yoga practice, you have these things called bandhas, right? Energy locks. So you have Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha with your throat. You got your Hasta Bandha for your hands, your Pada Bandha for your feet. So anything, you can always find locks inside your body and the connections to the ground and things of nature. So when it came to find stability, I just went back to that, right? With hands, locking my hands to the ground, pressing through my pointing finger knuckle to let it tie into my shoulder. So if I was letting that pointing finger knuckle come off the ground and tenting, I was finding a lack of stability inside my shoulder and I would find pain there. Or if my hands were too wide or too shallow or too close, I was finding pain in my wrists in certain places. So it's like finding the exact right place to put my hands to find stability. So it's actually a stack. Because at the end of the day, like the most stable place for me is a straight line. So if your hands are too wide, you're gonna overwork yourself, right? If your hands are too close, again, you're overworking yourself. So finding your hands in the right place. But at the same time, you got hand balancing and then you have yoga handstands. They're kind of slightly different, right? Because yoga handstands, you're going for transitions, you're jumping through, jumping back. And inside, to me, I might be wrong, but hand balancing is like really a true stack. Like your hands are like literally under your shoulders because you're not really worried about trying to transition through like feet through your hands or jump through or jump back. And that's kind of like something I like speak to certain times when people are asking, because I build handstand canes, right? So like trying to figure out like the shoulder distance and thing that you're for people. So like finding the stability was really understanding like how really to understand like my connection to the hands to the ground, the same way my feet are connected to the ground when I'm standing right side up, and just inverting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's pretty fascinating. So it sounds like you found your kind of the technical aspects of handstand through yoga, and that's different than maybe my background coming from the gymnastics world or maybe a circus performer coming from a hand balancing world. But I'm curious, have you worked with any gymnasts or hand balancers specifically, and have you noticed any differences in the approach to a handstand between maybe those three different disciplines?
I have actually. I have a friend. God, what's his name? Cal. He's in California. He's in Denver right now. He's him and a guy named Miguel. I've talked with them multiple times about handstands and their technique to handstand rather than a yoga handstand. I say yoga handstand and
Yeah,
arm,
sure.
right? Their technique is slightly different because their hands are a lot closer because of the stack, right? So you can find stability and ease inside of it. Trying to find that true line. So when I come to like finding length inside my handstand or trying to stay there for a longer period of time, my hands are a lot closer than when I'm just like worried about if I'm going from reaching my hands to the sky and the sun salutations, hands come down, taking it to a handstand, my hands a little bit wider because I'm actually doing certain things inside my practice to find a flow. But yes, there are some differences when it comes to yoga handstands and hand balancing handstands.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I come from more of the gymnastics background. Even gymnastics type handstand is slightly different than hand balancing as well in terms of width of hands because of what you're talking about with transitions. So one of the things that we always talk about with distance of hands apart, kind of use a general tool to say kind of middle finger to the outside of the shoulder is the shoulder width that we're looking for, whereas hand balancers kind of play around with more pinky to the outside of the shoulder, much more close and narrow. But because we're doing artistic gymnastics approach, it has transferability to other things, right? Like you're saying, transferring from one movement to another in yoga. Same with gymnastics. The handstand that we're teaching has application to a plank, to a support, to how I want you to hang from a bar and hang from rings, so you can transition to other movements. So I see a lot of similarities in terms of your approach to the handstand because of you're saying, I'm not just trying to stay inverted, I'm using that as a transition potentially to other skills as well. Would that be accurate?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about handstands all day unless you're going to jump in, Chad.
No, well, I was curious about the hand positioning, just in regards to being standardized, like you're saying, Dave, you recommend, just as a starting point, or a goal, I want you to be able to do a handstand with middle finger in line with the shoulder. But Ahmed, it sounded like you were saying that, for yourself and maybe for some other people that you've worked with, you maybe worked on a more individualized hand position. Is that correct? Just in regards to what's going to allow them to keep the most stable hand position that's going to lead up to the shoulder and to the rest of the body?
Yes, I would say individualized because like we all men and women have different widths of shoulders, right? It's probably about like 16 or 14 and a half, somewhere in the neighborhood, maybe even like 13 and a half. So when I build handstand canes, I'm going for like pointer finger underneath the shoulder, like that bone right here, not necessarily the mass of the shoulder. People are like, yeah, my shoulders are 17 inches, 18 inches wide. It's like, well, not the bulk of what we're building, right? It's like actually that bone, right? It was like the bone that you actually can touch. I don't necessarily know the actual bone right now on top of my head, but so like I actually go for that bone right there. I usually go pointer finger underneath of that. So that's my alignment. So when people are like, massive inside the shoulders, they got all those bulks, like I'm not really talking about the meat and everything. I'm talking about the bones. Like let's find alignment in the structure. So like that kind of detail as far as like individualized, yes. And I believe when I'm doing like planches and all that kind of stuff, I usually rotate my hands out to take some of that stress out of my wrist. So it depends on what you're working for, what you're actually doing. If you're actually talking about just standing inside of a handstand, I'm like pointing finger forward, pointing finger underneath your shoulder. It can be sometimes if you're comfortable making middle finger under your shoulder. It's like middle finger to pointer finger under your shoulder is usually my go-to. Like if you're doing something like that. But when you're talking about transitioning to like planches and all that kind of stuff, which I play with, but I'm not a professional. I usually turn my pinkies or pointer fingers outward to take some of that stress out of my wrists. Because there was a point in time that I was actually keeping my pointer finger forward. And I was like, man, it's just so hard on my wrist. And I'm really getting burnt out. But then I like watch multiple videos and listen to certain people. And I'm like, oh, I need to rotate them out a little bit to take some of that stress out. And watching gymnastics, people do it and things of that nature. So, but yeah, it's just playing around with just like what feels good. Because sometimes not everything feels great for everybody.
I was just going to say, I do love, I have to admit, I do love talking about handstands or listening to Dave and you guys talk about handstands because there's so much similarities in that and the squat. Where do we want to put your feet for the squat? How much do we want to turn your toes out and everything else? And, for me with teaching weightlifting and just for overall human health and potential, I think there is a more standardized foot position that people should lean towards. And it does sound like that's what you were talking about as well. You're talking about aligning the finger with the bones. And I love that marker, whereas it's not the outside of the meat of the shoulder, but it's more specifically aligning with that bone and that structure. And I love the way that you put that, but where it's different, where it is individualized, I think what you're saying is that because different people have different shoulder widths, that's where the width of your hands are going to be different. It's the same for the feet in a squat. It's not that we're individualizing your stance in regards to how wide your feet are necessarily. We're aligning them with a specific spot on the body, which makes it all look different. So I think it's important for people to kind of take that in and understand those basics what are the basics and what's the small range that we're trying to get people to do, and then what are the byproducts of those basics that we want people to accomplish. And the byproduct is the exact specific amount of the width of the hands, just like the exact width of the feet on a squat.
Mm-hmm. And I also find that hand positioning has something to do with your shoulders as well. Like a lot of people's shoulders capacity is not open enough, right? It's like,
Yep.
you want to access a handstand. It's like, well, let me see you lift your hands above your head.
Mm-hmm.
And their body starts to contort and other kind of things that nature. It's like, well, let's work on your shoulder capacity. So you can actually go up into a line that will feel good for your body and actually, safe for your body. So that kind of like plays into it as well. Like, if your hands are too close and you don't have shoulder mobility, you're not going to access a handstand. You're going to be in like a more of that planche kind of sensation. Yeah, kind of like a diagonal and then a line or whatever like that. Or you might be in a banana back sensation because you're trying to get into that inversion. But really, like shoulders have a whole lot to do. The openness of your shoulders have a whole lot to do with you actually be able to access a handstand safely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is actually one of the areas that has a lot of overlap with weightlifting. And when we teach at our Power Monkey camp, my station of handstands leads right into Chad's station.
Mm-hmm.
And Chad teaches basically barbell mobility. And one of the things that we really, both agree on is the importance of having good range overhead. And for handstands and over for bar, also for bar position overhead, whether that's being a snatch or finishing off a clean, being able to access that range is going to actually allow you to create efficiency, right? So we talk about what are the limitations with overhead position. We talked a little bit about just the shoulder joint in and of itself potentially being limited. Maybe it's a thoracic spine issue. Maybe it's your T-spine that's very limited. Maybe it's an underarm soft tissue issue that is your limiting factor. Your teres, your lats, your tricep, even pec and bicep can be very tight. And that's what some limiting factors in terms of being able to get a full overhead position, because getting to 180 degrees is almost the minimum with regards to a good overhead position with handstands, because the ideal, especially if we're talking about some more advanced movements, whether that be hand balancing, yoga, you want to be able to access movement that goes beyond 180 so that you can actually start incorporating new muscle groups, your upper back, your traps, your rear delts. You want to be able to access more so it can actually start working on more advanced movements. So I think it's absolutely critical to be able to make sure that people understand what that overhead position looks like. You said, like, put your arms up overhead. Let's see what you got there before we think about what it's going to look like and actually doing a handstand.
For sure, because you're about to add a whole lot of load
Yeah.
on your hands. And we're not meant to technically stand on our hands, right? It's like our body is built.
Well, not all of us.
Not all, right? So like, that load is necessary to understand before you take yourself upside down. Let's look at you right side up, right? Let's see how you breathe, right? Where you breathe inside the moment. Are you a belly breather? Like all this kind of like, because that's what I was before I became a yoga practitioner. I was a belly breather because I played music. So I was like, filling the cup up from the bottom and releasing from that place. So like, but when you go into a handstand, it's like you shouldn't be necessarily a belly breather because you need to keep that core engaged. You got to keep that, saying all that kind of stuff. And even actually understanding what the core is, right? It's like your core. It's like, yeah, I got to get this six pack in the front. It's like, well, that's not necessarily your core. It wraps around 3D to your back, supports you, things that need to take away back pain and all that kind of stuff. So like, just get people to understand like actually what we're doing rather than it's like, it's not just something that we're doing just for a cool party trick, right? It's like, this is some science towards all this.
Oh yeah, man, some great overlap between the way that we teach. I love hearing about this. Strong core, strong movement. I love that. And, not growing up with gymnastics, now where you are in your career, and would you wish you would have found this type of movement earlier on, whether it be through hand balancing or through yoga at a younger age or through gymnastics? Is that something you look back and say, man, I wish I would have done something like that as opposed to the sports that I actually picked up?
I would say yes, and yes to help out with the sports that I do.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like I play collegiate golf and things of that nature. Like now I teach golf players so they can have more range of movement. They actually have a healthier body. I teach mixed martial arts guys, like, cause they're always doing explosive, plyometric moves and all that kind of stuff. And then taking them into a yoga practice, slowing their whole body down with this, bring them into that slow twitch muscles, right? Rather than all the fast twitch muscles they always playing around with. And then the practice for holding a posture of 5 breaths, like, this is hard. It's like, well, it's just taking you out of your element. That's all. It's just bringing it to a different level of what your practice needs to kind of like find that yin and yang, right? So you find a balance. Because if you're overdoing one side, the other side is getting actually weaker. So you have to just find that balance. And in movements, like it's helping you out and it's taking it off the mat or taking it out of the gym, is finding balance in life. So if like you're overdoing one thing, you have to find some kind of situation to help out the other side.
Mhm.
Yep. So I want to speak a little bit about golf because something I picked up during the pandemic, and you were a collegiate golfer. Seems to be something that you're still pretty involved in these days. You know, teaching yoga to golfers, like you mentioned. But can you tell us a little bit about your golf path and how you found that passion?
Sure. Coming growing up with a big old large family. My father played golf, like something that he did with his homeboys. And for some reason, he played
You
travel
grew up
back.
in the Virginia, D.C. area.
Yeah, I grew up in DC.
Okay.
So my father played golf, and it was something I have a large family, five sisters, one brother. So like, like I want to be like my brother. He's 7 years older than me, so he learned how to play golf from my father. I was like, ooh, that looks cool. Let's do that. So I tried to play golf, learned how to play golf. My little sister started playing golf, so we played a lot of junior golf, traveling around the world, and then started playing collegiate golf. Went down to Benedict College in South Carolina and played golf there. Um, and now like left golf for a little bit of time. Now coming back to it, and then like trying to get into some pro am events. But like it's so awesome that I've been practicing yoga for a nice amount of time now, and it's not hard to get back to the swing. This is muscle memory, but my body is
Mhm.
not. It's not rusty. It's been moving
Mm.
for a nice
Mhm.
amount of time. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I got to play with my homeboys now and things of that nature. Like, are you always practicing? I'm always practicing yoga, but I'm always practicing rotation and four fours. My hamstrings, the quads are strong, and like all that kind of things are ready to go. So when I take the yoga swing, I mean the golf swing, it's just muscle memory, right? And like knowing how to shift the weight properly, know how to breathe properly inside your swing. All these things tie into it, right? Because if you're not breathing properly, like I said earlier, it's like no matter if you're doing heavy lifting weights, doing a handstand, walking down the street, right? No matter what you're doing, if you're not breathing properly, you're setting yourself up somewhat for failure. So, but golf is really yoga has really helped out with all those things. I wish I would have learned yoga back then because I think I would
Yeah.
have been a lot better inside of my situation. Because everyone who plays a certain sport is like, I'm gonna be a pro at it, right? So I thought I was going to play pro golf, but I have a couple friends who play pro golf now, but I teach them yoga as well. So I wish I would have learned yoga back then.
Yeah, I remember, Chad, I don't know about you with weightlifting world, whether or not, but when I was living at the Olympic Training Center, we started to incorporate yoga into our national team camps. And we used to do it a couple days a week. And it made such a big difference in terms of just how we moved. And I think most people think of gymnasts as being fairly flexible, fairly mobile, but there's certain areas that we overdevelop. You know, we have a tendency to overdevelop front part of our shoulder, pecs. We end up getting kind of into a very hunched position. Most gymnasts, we look like, we're gorillas sometimes because we're so hunched over. And we have a tendency not to balance that out. Like upper back, we have a lot of issues mobility wise, sometimes with upper back areas. And yoga helped change a lot of that. It helped us kind of create a little bit more balance in the way that we created our mobility and create a little bit more shoulder health. And with injuries being as prominent as they are in the gymnastics world, it was a huge benefit to the team. Uh, Chad, have you ever incorporated any yoga into your training while you were an athlete or even now?
No, I'm not opposed to it, and I think there could certainly be some benefits to that. One of the things that I do believe from learning more about gymnastics, to be honest, Dave, is that weightlifters, at least on the elite side, seem to be a little more balanced in that regard than gymnasts do. I think there
Yeah.
are some common compensations that we see in the gymnastics world from what you're talking about, and very regularly weightlifting is described as either yoga or ballet with a barbell. And then
Mhm.
I don't want to say it's like to that level, but I mean weightlifters are very flexible, very very mobile. They have access to greater ranges than most normal people do, by and far most normal people do. So I think there's something to be said for those phrases of yoga or ballet with the barbell. I'd be interested to get your perspective on that, Ahmed. Have you done, much lifting or incorporated any of that? And then I have some other golf questions as well.
That's what's up. Before when I was doing playing collegiate golf, I would definitely do weightlifting to help out with that because I'm a advocate, I'm not gonna say was. I'm still an advocate lover of Tiger Woods, right? So watching
Mm,
his career progress, and even just watching him walk down like the 18th hole with his red shirt on, I'm like, why is his pec so large? Like, why is his back like things of that nature? And knowing that he like he can lift like 350 pounds bench press.
mm,
I'm like, whoa, didn't know that. So now I need to start working on and things of that nature. So I didn't do yoga when I was actually lifting weights in that kind of manner, but even now, like every once in a while, I'll put some weights on a bench and get it in and see what my capability is to see where I'm at. But I find myself every time I lift weights, I have to do extra amount of yoga to find more mobility, because my
Mm-hmm.
body is not used to it, right? But it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing like taking my MMA guys off of the mat and putting them on a yoga mat. It's just something
Mm-hmm.
that I don't do on a regular basis. So something that I'm looking to incorporate, because that kind of strength exercise and strength and mobility is necessary to put together. So I find myself doing a whole lot more calisthenics, rather than a lot more weightlifting. But yeah, I would
Mm-hmm.
love to enjoy to incorporate that with the right person.
Yeah, with that being said, one of the things about weightlifting and where I think something like yoga could be beneficial, even on the elite level to these athletes that are, like I said, extremely mobile, extremely flexible, is that one thing that does happen to us is that we do, if we're not paying attention, if we're not exaggerating our positions and holding them and stretching them and mobilizing in certain ways, then our body will mold to certain positions. For example, holding a bar in the front rack in my fingertips for all of my career molded the bend in my elbow to that specific bend that my fingertip is. So now I'm spending a lot of time full gripping the bar because it causes my elbow to bend more. It's an exaggerated position to what I'm normally using and normally used to. And so I think that is something that weightlifters and really, obviously CrossFitters as well need to pay a lot of attention to. So I like what you said there, that combination and finding that balance. And, going back to one of the things that you said earlier, Dave, talking about if someone can only go to 180 degrees, with their arms overhead, like, and needing to be able to do more than that, it's because if you can only go 180, if that's your in range, you're never going to be comfortable in a handstand or with the bar overhead. So that's another reason why we need that extra range. And going back to weightlifting, that's why I need to do full grip front squats as much as I can, because it's going to make my regular fingertip grip much more usable, much more comfortable. But I'm curious, kind of along these lines as well, you talked about working with golfers and mixed martial arts athletes. And you talked a little bit about yourself, the benefits in yoga to playing golf. Like you can just go play golf now and you're perfectly fine, almost like you've never left it. But how long does it typically take those athletes that you work with to become even somewhat comfortable, or is comfortable even the right word, somewhat comfortable with yoga just in general? And once they do, or if they do, or with applying it, what do you see in their ability with a golf club or with mixed martial arts because of that?
I find I'm not going to necessarily put a timeline on it because everybody's
Mm-hmm.
different, right? I found that when somebody can actually learn how to connect to their breath and like listen to their body, it opens up their mind in a different aspect, right? If I can connect to inhale back on my golf swing, exhale through, and know the length of my breath inside of that
Mm-hmm.
moment, right? It allows me to like know when I get to the back of my swing, this is when I need to turn on the explosion, right? Or if I'm in a mixed martial arts position and I'm on the ground, I'm like, okay, cool. They're about to try to tap me out. It's like, okay, let me slow my breath down so I'm not panicking and things of that motion in that nature. So I know when exactly I need to move faster. Um, and it's really, for me, it ties, everything really ties back to breath for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
it helps me speed myself up, slow myself down, find focus, kind of push me into that matrix, right? That's why a lot of football players, basketball players are tapping into yoga. They're actually getting trained to like mental capacity or mental wellness, right? They're like learning how to meditate so they can like find stillness inside the speed, right? And when it comes to golf golf is like a lot slower than mixed martial arts, technically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I find like when I teach either one of them, I'm always tapping back to breath. Like, okay, when you inhale, what happens to your body? When you exhale, what happens to your body? When you hold your breath, what happens to your body? How do you feel? Like actually asking just random questions or those kind of questions to people so that they actually think rather than just like, okay, this has to be like this. I have to do an XYZ. It's always like, let's ask ourselves better questions in our body, because you can be doing something and like, well, I did this because it was supposed to be done that way. But were you breathing? I wasn't actually able to access a certain thing. What were you doing? Like, ask yourself the question, because you're not asking yourself the question, then you can't give yourself the answer.
How
Yeah.
challenging is something like that? Because, when we're dealing with, I assume the same as when, you're dealing with a golfer who's trying to improve their swing and then incorporating the breathing technique on top of it. If we're doing that with someone that's, learning a handstand, most of the time, people's main concern with learning a handstand is just survival at first, right? Especially when it comes to CrossFitters. Like, I just don't want to collapse on my head, let alone like what my breath is doing or where my eye line is at. Snatching the bar, like I just want to make sure that I have my, setup correct, not what my breathing is. How hard have you, how hard is it for you to be able to get people to recognize the importance of breath when they're doing something complex, whether that be, you know, in an MMA fight or in, their golf swing? Is it something that you've found to be fairly easy to incorporate, or something that actually takes a significant amount of time?
Um, I found it eventually easy to come to make it roll around to somebody, right?
Mhm.
Because usually on the side of my yoga practice, I usually start off with just breath, like 4 count in, 4 count out. 4 count in, hold your breath for 4 counts. Exhale for 4 counts, hold your breath for 4 counts. I do a lot of Wim Hof breathing exercises as well, like just playing around with different breathing techniques. So when it comes to them understanding, okay, so like asking that question, like when I did the 4 count in, 4 count out, let's talk about that. 4 count in, hold your breath for 4 counts, exhale 4 counts, exhale. Let's talk about that. Like let's speak about what you're feeling inside that moment. So then, okay, you're not doing any movements at all. You're just laying down, sitting down. Let's talk about that. Okay, let's do smaller movements, bring some movements into that breath. Let's talk about that. And just elevating it, just adding just some levels to that. So when they actually get to their like the top peak of what they're supposed to be doing, they're not even thinking about it anymore. It's just second nature with breath, movement, and thought.
And you're saying that you incorporate those easy breathing techniques into all of your sessions, like right off the bat, like as the initial part of every session?
Yes, I used to actually play a drum, it's called a steel pan drum. I used to like play a drum so it tunes them into like 4 count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and like so they can just like tune out with everything, right? Because a lot of times we just subconsciously breathe, and it's like, how do you breathe? Are you a nose breather? Are you a mouth breather? You're a belly breather? Chest breather? What do you breathe, right? And understand like what compartments are you breathing into? So it's like I usually start off whenever I have a private lesson. I don't even add any movement. I talk to them about their day, talked about what they're doing, like what they're eating, that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Let's sit down and do some breathing. And we'll
Mhm.
probably spend about 15, 20 minutes on breath work. And I'll look at their body like, okay, cool. When you breathe, why are your shoulders tensing up? Like, let's just relax a little bit. Why is the tension coming about when you're breathing? Where's the tension? Where's the tension inside your body? Where's the relaxation inside your body? Like speaking upon that and allowing them to ask themselves their questions. So usually when I do any private lessons or I go like jump into a yoga studio for the first time or whatever like that, I usually start off with breath work and get them to understand like the breath is the key. If we can't breathe, we can't move properly. You know.
And, I mean, I think that's awesome to be able to do that and to get people to buy in to understand the importance of breathing, because it does really tie into everything else so well. If like you said, Ahmed, about being able to get breathing to the point where it happens naturally, where you don't need to think about it, right? The breath that you want for that particular moment in time, you can access as needed.
Right.
I'm thinking this from a CrossFitter perspective, right, Chad? Like, come in the gym, you have an hour of training. I want to get in, I want to get out. You think CrossFitters buy into spending 15 minutes on breathing before they actually pick up a barbell?
Oh, it would be tough. I mean, I learned from coaching CrossFit for many years and owning a gym that what most CrossFitters want, and there's to me, there's not really anything wrong with this other than it is skipping some steps. They want to come in and they want to breathe hard, breathe hard the right or the wrong way, and they want to feel like they did something. They're there for the community, and so a lot of them don't really want to be taught. They don't necessarily want to do mobility, all these things that we feel are basic and are going to help them, live better, health and longevity, and have better potential just as an athlete. But I think that what we have to do as coaches, and we talk about this a lot, of course, Dave, what we have to do as coaches or owners of gyms is we have to teach what we believe is most important. So, for me, if I believe that spending 15 minutes on your squat position and mobility to make that the best that it can be, and then we have 45 minutes left to do whatever after that, that's what I need to believe in strong enough to apply within that session. So maybe now Ahmed's going to convince me that it needs to be 10 minutes of breathing and then 10 minutes of squat mobility, in which we can breathe in, we can breathe during while we do our squat position work and our mobility. And so maybe that is the answer, is that if breathing, we've talked, as you said, Dave, we talked so much about breathing here lately, and it does seem like it's the base of everything. It's so important. So maybe it's not necessarily about doing a whole lot of anything different or spending more time on just isolating that one thing, but teaching people how to do that while we're warming up. And then we can get both of those things then that we want and that we're normally doing. And we can do it maybe in a way to where they don't even realize we're doing anything different, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And I was asking you more, hoping that you would take in that direction, saying that we can actually apply this with a CrossFit type setting and actually
Mhm.
get the benefit out of it. Because I think everyone, even if, you're getting in and just trying to use that hour to sweat and, be with the community, that breathing is going to allow for you to have a more efficient movement pattern, in turn giving you more longevity within the sport, which I think that's one of our main goals, is right, to be able to give people the ability to do what they love to do for as long as they possibly can. And I'm curious, Ahmed, what your goal is with the people that you work with. It seems like you work with a variety of different backgrounds, being athletes that are still training at the highest level, whether that be in golf or in MMA, and then the everyday athlete, the weekend warrior, when it comes to your yoga practice. Uh, what are your goal? Is it different depending on the person's individual, in their individual goals? But kind of, how is your approach with people when it comes to what you're trying to get them to understand with your methods?
It definitely has a lot to do sometimes with their individual goals, but at the same time, it's like I want you to be able to bend down and tie your shoes, right, without pulling a
Yeah.
muscle, blowing something out, right?
Mhm.
Um, because you can do a lot of different things efficient inside of your own practice, but then you step outside of the practice and you just step off the curb and twist your ankle, right?
Mhm.
So usually it just ties back into understanding what you're working towards, and then we can build from that. And then also like just looking at your practice, like if you're not breathing, like I always, you're gonna hear me say breath all the time. That's probably why I'm probably gonna be on this camp with breathing, right?
Hmm.
Pranayama. And Trying to access all the things inside of our explosive part of our life and just our relaxed part of our life. To me, it just ties back into breath. Like it's
Mhm.
really every day. It's just understanding that. And once I understand that, and once I can actually see that you're breathing properly inside of your movements, it's like, okay, cool. We could turn it up even more now. You know what I'm saying? Because I can sweat hard doing wrist workouts to warm up for handstands, like
Right.
because I'm breathing properly, right? It's like, and I'm like, okay, now I'm getting tense. I can cool myself down with the proper breath. Like, okay, now I'm relaxed. And so it's just like understanding like the notches of what you can do with breath, and then you can turn it up to CrossFit. You can do it to handstand. You can go walk down the street for 20 miles, whatever like that, and you're breathing properly. It's like now I can do anything and everything for a longer period of time. But my truly focus is just long, like you said, longevity,
Hmm.
making everything you do easy,
Mhm.
right? If I can do some deep yoga postures, that's cool. But can I, like, I find myself saying, like, I do yoga so I can do random dumb stuff, like slide behind a cabinet or slide
Mhm.
behind the microwave or I'm like the washing machine to pick up a screw. It's like I do all the yoga,
Mhm.
like, so I can get to that place to get to those things. But because
That's not dumb stuff. That's useful. That's everyday stuff that you need
exactly
to be
right,
able to do,
functional,
right?
right? Functional movement.
Yeah.
So like, because I've had guys, I'm in the Equinox gym training or whatever, like they're doing my own practice. Like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, well, get my practice in. Are you doing handstands? Like, what is that? I'm like, what's a part of my yoga practice? Are you only doing handstand and yoga? No, I do a whole lot of other stuff as well. Why don't you come join us? Like, just
Mhm.
it's fun to have like somebody see you doing random things in your own practice. I'm like, what is that? How do I execute that? And it's like, well, come join me. Let's do other stuff on top of this one thing that may bring you into something else.
Mhm.
Right. And you mentioned a little bit in terms of you bringing some of these methodologies and techniques to our new Restore camp. Um, this is something completely new for us. We're really excited to get you out on board with us with some of our other new instructors. But I'm curious if you can give a little bit more insight into exactly what you're hoping to bring to the people that are attending. Imagine that they've, have very little introduction into breathing techniques. Imagine they have a little bit of introduction into yoga. But what are you hoping to be able to get across to them, and kind of how are you anticipating those sessions going?
Um, I'm anticipating those sessions being great actually, because everyone's coming into these sessions with open mind, right? Whether they're CrossFitter, whether they're hand balances, whether just mom and pop, whatever their nature, they're coming in with an open mind because they're trying to. Everybody's coming in with wanting to be better, right? So I believe that everyone's coming to an open mind. So I'm gonna come in with it with just like, okay, let's get right into this practice right here and understanding coming back into the breath, like, okay, well, what parts of your body hurt inside the practice? Do you sit down and your back hurts? Are you always slouching over? like we said, like gymnastic people, kind of like this kind of situation. We type at our keyboards, we eat food, we drive in the car. Like, what kind of things can breath help you expand inside your life, open up inside your life, to release different pain, you know what I'm saying, to release stress, anxiety. I have a sister of mine who used to give a lot of anxiety attacks. She would call me up while she was driving, pull over, let's do some breathing exercises. Now you can get back on the road and keep driving. And just to understand like how breath is so important with all the things that we do, like really understanding that. Once we understand that, we can do pretty much any movement we want to, really, because you're breathing properly. You're doing a handstand, like I can't execute this. Did you breathe? How are you breathing when you did that? I don't know. Ask yourself when you do it. Think about it when you do it. Like, actually think about the movement, actually think about the breath. So it ties all together. And if you're not thinking about the movements, then it's hard for you to actually execute it, right? Because if you think about it in the beginning and you do it over and over and over again, it becomes second nature, because you don't have to think about it. It becomes subconscious.
Yeah, I love that. I think it would be good if your session in breathing just led right into my handstand session. We can kind of like use some of the breathing techniques right into getting inverted. Because most of the time, you know, I can tell right away if someone is breathing in their handstand. Right, they come down, faces beat red, they're gasping for air even after just a 10-second hold. Like, well, clearly, you know, it's something we need to be considering to. If you want to be able to do a long handstand or some kind of muscle endurance type handstand, you got to be able to actually breathe a little bit while you're up there too. But it could be really cool to be able to incorporate a lot of those techniques right into a session of handstand. So I'm pumped for this, man. I'm pumped to get you out there and to be able to work with you on person. You talked a little bit about calisthenics. You talked a little bit about doing planche work. You know, those are a lot of gymnastics-based movements. I think maybe you miss your calling in the gymnastics world.
Possibly, you know, I love to do back. I'm with you on that. I do backflips, front rounds, front house, you know, forward flips and all that kind of stuff. I just like being outside. I'm just like a nature guy. You know what I'm saying? I love animalistic practice, yoga practicing in nature. So yeah, I can't wait. Really, it's funny. Like, you know, it's funny because, like you said, bringing that breath work into your yoga practice, or bringing that breath work into your handstand practice, or into your handstand training. Usually, when I teach handstands, like, if you can talk to me while you're upside down, I know you're breathing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's and if you can't talk to me, because I know you're like, please hold on a second. Let's chill for a moment, regroup, and let's go back upside down. Because the handstand whatever pose you're trying to execute, it's a pose. It's work being done, but you have to fill your body with the gas that you need, and that gas is breath. If you're not breathing, you will pass out. Like you said, come down with red face or whatever like that. All that kind of stuff will just fall into the practice because you're not breathing properly.
So one of the things that we are constantly preaching with Power Monkey, and specifically with me and Chad, the way we teach is just that technique is paramount. That technique matters. Everything comes back to proper technique. And it seems like you teach the same way. Would you say that proper technique, because it's sometimes individualized, right? Just in terms of like hand position, like, okay, it's going to be dependent on your anatomy, but how important is proper technique when you're teaching this stuff? And is that something that you impart on people on a regular basis? Or are you saying, let's just get you involved. Let's get you to do this on a regular basis, and then we'll kind of build a technique from there. Where do you see technique being placed in terms of how you teach?
Technique is at the door front. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So if we try to like jump over to do a lot of other stuff, you're really bypassing what you should be learned in the beginning, right? If you're doing a handstand, you're just jumping up there, hand planes not proper, you're breaking down the structure, right? It's like understanding my construction background. It's like if you have a weak foundation and you put a whole lot of load on that, the foundation's gonna fall or the structure's gonna fall. So like from the beginning, understanding the structure or understanding technique is paramount. If you have the wrong technique when you're trying to do a muscle up or a snatch or whatever like that, a long straight line handstand or a warrior two, no matter what posture you're doing, no matter what axis or exercise you're doing, if you have the wrong technique and you keep on adding on top of that wrong technique, eventually somewhere down the road, there's a break inside of that, or unfortunately, an injury that might be coming your way, right? The technique is not done properly. And sometimes you have to unlearn bad habits. So like, but it's hard to unlearn a bad habit when you've been doing it for 5 years, right? You're like, this is the right way to do it because I've been doing it for 5 years and it's been working for me. Well, that's great to hear, but you might have one more thing inside of you and that might be the wrong one. It's unfortunate. Don't want to put any bad juju on you, but this is the realness. Like you got to learn the right way. It's like, inside of school. You got to learn the right way to do math. You got to learn the right way to write English properly, right? You got to learn how to do science properly, because you do science wrong, you're going to blow something up. It's like, oh, I thought that was the right way to put that chemical in that right there. It's like, if you have the right technique from jump, you can do a lot of things that your body or your mind thought you couldn't do because you have the right technique. Everything's aligned.
Do you find people buy into that pretty easily, or because we have a challenge sometimes with people buying into that mentality, especially when a habit's been built over years and years a particular way? Do you find that people are who buy into that in terms of how you approach it with them?
I believe they do, right? Really, because at the end of the day, like, I've gotten injured before with bad technique. So I speak upon my, right? I'm like, well, I know it hasn't happened to you yet, but I'm just speaking upon what I've been through. I've had bad technique before and I've injured myself. I've had bad technique before and I've felt bad inside my body when I make certain movements, but I think that's how it's supposed to be done. So I really speak upon, like, I'm not putting anything on you right now, but I'm just letting you know that if the technique is not done properly, there's multiple different techniques to do different workouts, right? It's not saying that my technique is a perfect way. You have a certain technique, you got a certain technique, and as long as the technique is safe, I'm all about it, right? If you're doing it safe and properly, I'm cool beans with it, right? If you're doing something unsafe and then you're like, this is awesome because I'm lifting a heavy load, it's like, well, one thing go wrong, and unfortunately, it's just really just when I get people to buy into that, that's how I get people to buy into it, because I'm like, I don't want you to get injured. This is a safe space. Whatever you want to say is a safe space. How you do it, that's what we want everybody to be safe, so we can go back tomorrow and pick your child up. You want to be able to go to the grocery store and pick your bags up. You want to be able to do everything inside of life with ease and with no pain.
Yeah, well, I'm at the fact that you don't come from the CrossFit world, but we have so many similarities in terms of how we approach things. I think it's great to hear that technique is so paramount in your world. The fact that we're bringing you in for our new Restore fits in extremely well with the way that we preach and the way that we've been doing things for years now. So I'm incredibly excited to actually be able to do this in person with you in a few months. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Before you jump off, would you mind just answering a couple quick questions with us?
Sure.
Kind of some rapid fire.
Can we skip over the first one?
No, absolutely not. No. First one is, what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Gymnastics.
Hey, a better answer would be yoga. How about you just say yoga and say you don't
We'll
like
put a little asterisk next to that one. Yeah, you can add yoga in there, or golf. But you just throw that one in there. Next question. Any particular person that you've come across lately or know that might be a great guest for the podcast?
Carson Clay Calhoun, good homeboy of mine.
All right, we got to put us in touch. What does he do?
He's a yoga practitioner, hand balancer. He loves to lift weights.
Oh, wow.
There
Right.
you go.
Yeah. He's one of the people that was like, getting deep squats and all that kind of stuff, overhead press and all that kind of stuff to help out with his handstand and staying there longer. So he's an awesome guy. Like, I've learned a whole lot from him, and we teach together and all that kind of stuff. So Carson.
Awesome. Well, if he's someone that might answer that question, weightlifting, I'm sure Chad is going to go well out of his way to try to book him for the podcast.
Yeah. Weightlifting, it should just be a branch of yoga. It's barbell yoga. That's what it is. And he figured that out. So we should absolutely have him on. Next question. Any books that you've come across here recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Probably has nothing to do with weightlifting or anything, but The Compound is an amazing book, and Who Not How is an amazing book. Asking yourself better questions, whether it's with business, whether it's with partnerships, whatever like that, rather than asking yourself, how can I get this project done or this task done? Asking yourself, who can I get to assist me? Because I'm always about teamwork makes the dream work, because whether you're a millionaire or whatever like that, you have a team to get you there and keep less stress, get a better product and things of that nature. And the compound effect is pretty much just like unlearning bad habits, but it's like, a habit is created in 90 days. So if you don't have 90 days to do something, it's not really a habit.
I think both of those go perfectly with what we're trying to accomplish in weightlifting, gymnastics, and sports in general. And I like the way that you've worded the way that you teach, and you have people ask questions. I like to ask questions all the time to my athletes or the people that I'm working with, because I want them to really think about things, and I want to point out and get them to understand what you're saying doesn't make sense, right? Think about what you're doing. ask yourself these questions. So I love that. And I think those books are perfect recommendations. We'll add those to the list as well. Ahmed, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing how things go out there at Restore and everything else. And hopefully I can meet you in person in the future as well. Anything you got coming up aside from Restore that you want folks to know about? Where can they keep up with you?
You can keep up with me on AhmedTheYogiman.com. Check me out there. You can reach out for private lessons, things of nature, all things great that I'm doing. I'm about to actually head to Costa Rica on Thursday for a yoga retreat that I do annually. And working to put a yoga studio together by August to make things happen, to build more community and understand that also that physical therapy is a necessary part of healing, right? Because I think a lot of people bypass that physical therapy is a doctorate. It's a healing practice as well. So, but yeah, so I'm doing the Costa Rica retreat. Check me out on AhmedTheYogiman.com. You can check me out on Instagram at yogiman_83, the best year around. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned folks can reach out to work with you privately. Is that just in person or do you do online as well?
I do virtually and online group classes and all the things.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, to our listeners out there, be sure to check him out. Ahmed, you did an incredible job on the podcast today. I really enjoyed listening to you. You absolutely line up with the way that we teach, and I found a lot in common with you. So I appreciate the way that you think and everything else. And guys, also be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. Until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.